everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope you can all hear me well. So, my name is Mykyta Fastovets. I'm the CTO at ExpoPlatform and its co-founder. And I've been with the company basically from the beginning. And I want to talk to you about this concept of smart events and how data can be used to build them, enhance them, and work with them. So before I dive in to details, I want to show you just a little overview video that will describe our idea of smart events. So it's about 2 minutes.
Smart events use digital technology to increase the value of the experience for visitors, exhibitors, and organizers. They have become an essential part of making profitable, engaging live events. Like you, they have spent the time during the pandemic developing new digital approaches. Now is the time to bring those back to live events, making more engaging experiences for participants and more money for organizers. Founded in 2013, ExpoPlatform have a full suite of tools for more impactful in-person, including AI matchmaking, lead retrieval, hosted buying, and exhibitor ROI dashboards.
So that gave you a good overview about kind of what we're doing in general. I want to just point out 3 key things. So for us, smart events are a combination of various factors, right? So one is bringing together technology with a live event experience. And so that happens with a combination of an event website that brings together kind of networking inside it, the mobile application which allows us to enhance the on-site experience, and then overreaching all of that, there can be a community/marketplace hub that can sit across a portfolio of events and bring all of that into a coherent 365 experience. So that's kind of the full suite of event experience and smart event experience that we're looking to offer to event organizers. This is kind of our vision. So I want to go a little bit more into detail. So these are some of the customers we work with. So we work with some of the world's biggest brands in the exhibition industry, and we're very focused on delivering excellent B2B experiences and really driving the connection, the connection between buyers and sellers ultimately. So everything that we're going to talk about today is really about how do we enhance the return on investment, return on time for the various audiences and stakeholders in these events. So before I carry on, I want to go a little bit deeper into what a smart event means for us. You saw a little bit of a video overview about what we do in various stages, but I want to really break it down in terms of what happens before, what happens during the event, and what are the kind of what happens after. So in the before event stage, we've got the registration. And we'll talk separately about how a solution could be architectured, because this is one of the things that I want to talk to you about. But essentially, we've got registration. That's an essential part of an event. If you already have a community that you're interacting with as an organizer, then this could be linked with some kind of single sign-on technology or something else that will make the journey more integrated and seamless. based on the registration journey and what people tell you, we would be able to, or you should be able to, present a relevant experience for them with content that's targeted based on what they've told you they're interested in. So there's an AI recommendation engine of some kind that should be sitting behind this. And that allows people to really plan their event in a much more personalized way. So we move away from saying, let's build a generic event that targets every subject that we can. And instead we say, for every individual, we're going to create an event that is able to really cater towards what they're interested in. So that could be, if we're talking about buyers and sellers, we could be talking about a hosted buyer program, for example, right, which segments out your VIP buyer sector and really tries to cater towards their needs in a much more efficient way as well. So that's kind of the visitor/buyer side. On the exhibitor side, we're talking about a stand booking. So pre-event, you should be driving them to book a stand. This should go into a centralized CRM system. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There might be as well orders that you wish to collect for them for additional, stand equipment, staff, services, whatever. And they should be able to kind of create and upload the profile information as an exhibiting company, add their staff, add their content, basically create a profile that attracts and slots them for the right buyers to find them, to discover them. And there's really a discovery stage here. So this planning and discovery, it's all about how do we make discovery of content and how do we make discovery of vendors easier and more intuitive and more relevant. So that's what all this preparation is really about. So once the exhibitors have populated the profiles, the next stage is that the recommendation engine picks that up and tries to make it as efficient and as interesting for the buyers as possible. So this is the kind of pre-event journey. So then during the event, what happens during the event is a number of different things, right? So we should be covering everything from navigation, which is getting around the venue, particularly important if we're talking about large events where we have a large number of exhibiting companies, right? And these events can be very focused. So for example, a fashion event that brings together the fashion industry might have hundreds or thousands of companies in some cases. And navigation is a big issue. And navigation should ideally be content aware, at least to some extent. So then is the ability to view, of course, the agenda. I think we will understand that's valuable, being able to see when and what content is going to be happening. The ability to check into meetings and check into exhibitor booths to understand and capture the information about interactions. So one of the key struggles that we have as an industry is understanding, we've had this very long pandemic period where anything and everything was always happening online. And I think we've all collectively learned that capturing information online is actually much easier than capturing it on site, right? We've become, I think I would say, a little bit spoiled by the fact by how easy it is to capture information online and bring it all into context. This is much more complicated when we're talking about an on-site scenario. Technologies that can be deployed can be expensive and costly and can be difficult to deploy, right? So capturing data on site is extremely important, and there should be various tools available at your disposal to do that. So meeting check-ins and tracking of kind of blue dot navigation, location tracking, all these things are tools that are at your disposal to be able to capture information in the real world, right? Which is a slightly different, more challenging than capturing it online. But that should all be brought into context with whatever happens online pre-event and post-event, which we'll talk about in a second as well. So then we've got the check-in kind of meetings. There's access into the event, which is an important aspect, kind of the next stage of registration. We've had our registration journey where we submitted our information, kind of some kind of background learning has happened. Now we need to recognize this person when letting them into the event. And the more basic things are things like barcode scanning or QR code scanning, right? But also you can do more advanced things like facial recognition. I know it hasn't really taken off in our industry very much yet, but I think that it's something that should take off because it does make, especially if we're talking about cases like the pandemic and so on, and we're talking about contactless experiences, that can be something that should be looked into further. So we're talking about context awareness as well. So things like reminders that fly in, they can be linked to where you're located, or they can be linked to the time that is right now to let you know that you've got a meeting coming up or a session that you've booked into your calendar, how to get there. This is all kind of a linked up experience. Then finally, after you've had, you've attended your session or you've attended your event, the ability for you to give feedback. I think this is one of the things that's currently missing quite frequently is, a lack of a reliable way to collect feedback from the audience. So the ability to be able to rate that in the app in a very simple way, even to participate in the app in a session, right? So right now we're having a session. There could be an online chat, for example, with participants who are participating online, and there should be some kind of interaction and an ability for us to provide feedback collectively to all of that. Then if we're talking about meetings specifically, one of the most important things in a B2B environment is for the organizer to understand, did quality meetings, first of all, did meetings actually take place, right? And what was the quality of the meetings that took place? So the ability to scan leads and score them, but also to rate meetings is extremely important. So this is something that forms then the backbone of understanding, have we done our job? Has whatever we deployed actually produced the results? And if it hasn't, we should be able to capture enough data to understand why not, right? So the level of detail here is important. So we've produced an AI blueprint. We've produced a number of blueprints over the last year, I guess. And one of the most recent ones is the AI blueprint. And one of the things we talk about here is that kind of over the course of the pandemic and as a result of it, our platform in particular, but probably other platforms as well, have started capturing a lot more data about users. That's a combination of multiple factors. One is technology has just progressed. So we've learned all as an industry to better capture information, to better store information, and to better give back that information, right? But the second factor is that adoption has actually gone way up. So we were in a period when everybody was sort of forced to use online technology, right? Where 3 years ago, if you went to a show, the adoption rate of digital platforms was quite low. Now, I think universally, we all agree and understand what is the point, what does it give, and so on. And as we come back into live events, it is extremely important that we're able to communicate to all stakeholders, the value that they get from these platforms, which I think they now more intuitively understand. So I just wanted to say that 20 times more data is captured than pre-pandemic levels, and this actually helps to clarify why a 365 model has become much more possible now than, again, 5 or 6 years ago, where there were multiple experiments with various companies launching 365 marketplaces, and they were just not doing well, right? So because the interaction and adoption levels have gone up, we've got a much stronger case for why these marketplaces can take off now better. One of the other very important things that to mention is that there was a heated debate about data ownership. Who should own the data, where should it be stored, how should it be used, and so on. We believe that debate is now over. We see that the organizers now have finally clearly defined for themselves that they should be the ultimate controllers of their data. And the job of the platforms is to, of course, use the data to improve the event itself, but it is not a resource that platforms should be kind of using for their own benefit to sell on, which was an issue. And so one of the questions that still remains is, how can we extract actual tangible value from this massive influx of data? So we recently did a study and a survey, which is actually also a part of our AI blueprint, and we asked organizers all over the world to tell us, what are the greatest opportunities that you see as an organizer for data and how to use data to improve your business analytics and to kind of improve your business as a whole. So the top things you can see clearly on there. So one of the top things was, gain insight into improving our product. That was number one. A very close second was, collecting data sources to provide a 360 view of our customers. Which I'll talk about in a second further, because that's one of the fundamental issues that we have in the industry right now, is that we talk about things that are more advanced than where we currently are. So the third most important thing was creating personalized experience with recommended content, and then connecting suppliers and buyers. And then a seamless experience across the customer journey was another very highly rated one. I'm not going to read them all, but so you've got that there for reference. But these are sort of the top 5 things I think are the key areas where we think the industry should be looking and should be focusing right now. So the next question we asked, having looked at this list, is what are some of the key challenges that you as an organizer are facing when you think about the objectives that you got? What are the key challenges? And this is the breakdown of the responses. So as you can see, the number 1 response was the data foundation was the most critical missing piece in terms of making progress towards their desired goals. 24% also said that there were organizational issues. So from our experience, we come across both of these things quite frequently, right? So we're talking about 76% of cases where they're not ready to progress to the next more advanced stage because there are organizational and data foundational issues. So what are these issues? Data foundation means that a lot of the organizers, we're talking about a range of organizers really, but from leading organizers to kind of medium-sized organizers are in the process of renewing their technology stack. That means bringing together things like CRM technology, right? Re-centralizing, reanalyzing how data is gathered and where does it ultimately live. And the data ownership debate that I mentioned earlier was a very big and central part of that, right? Previously, there was a lot of talk about, okay, should we have a single vendor that keeps all our data? Could that vendor be an event platform? How will that vendor then use our data, and so on and so forth. So that debate is now over, and now we have a clearly established picture that the central data hub that actually will collect data from various different sources, including the CRM, but also interaction data and all the data that we capture, is a separate layer. And I'll show you a slide about that shortly. So a lot of the organizers are building that, the concept, they're building the architecture, implementing that, they're at that stage. The organizational issue is another, I think, key component that we've been talking about probably for about a decade now, but it's technical talent. So one of the things that many organizers are still missing is technical people who understand data. And it doesn't mean building a data science team. It doesn't mean that you have to have a whole team of people working on machine learning algorithms. Not at all. What we mean is just having people, at least one person in your organization, who is able to talk about data, analyzing data, and just understanding how to use it. And then ideally someone who understands technology and how to connect different bits of technology. So those are 2 critical roles that usually lack leadership roles as well, right? So there needs to be a driver from the top down to deal with data and to deal with technology. So these are 2 key things. So based on all of these things that we just talked about, this is the most technical slide I've got in the whole presentation, by the way, so not to scare anyone away. But the idea here is just to present to you a very high-level potential architecture sample solution that would hit a lot of these targets. So what I've done here is I've color-coded the different vendors, right? So one of the other issues that this industry is faced with is deciding, should we go for a best-in-class vendor for every single item that we want to do and end up with 20 vendors, or should we just throw everything to one vendor? And how do we, or if not one vendor, how should we separate vendors? What is the logical link? What things link up together well? So what I've done is color-coded here the different things that I think make sense to have within one vendor. And there's a little flow diagram here. So essentially, this demonstrates 2 flows. On the right-hand side, you've got the kind of community and marketplace flow, which is your 365 experience, which is kind of the overreaching experience. And a user can come into a community website. The website is a discovery platform where they just find out, is it relevant for them? Is it interesting? Do they want to get involved, right? Then they would potentially register, and that should go into a central CRM system. So this is one of the key changes, that is happening right now, is that organizers are realizing, we should have a central CRM system where we have a global customer view. And the CRM here is really about customer data. We're not talking about data at the kind of clickstream level or interaction level. We're talking about, did they book an order? What order-based interactions did they have with us? What is their contact information? Just the basics like that. who's responsible for them, and so on and so forth. CRM. So from the website, they then dive into a community kind of marketplace platform where they can participate in various things. If they make orders on that marketplace, that also gets logged into CRM. And then all of the interaction data, so things like who did they view, what did they do, did they book meetings, did they join those meetings, did they, anything and everything that happens, then goes into a separate platform that is essentially a data lake. So this platform is there to gather information. And this platform is there I'll talk about this in the next slide, but for those, there's about 50% of organizers who are building their own data science teams. So for those organizers who are, this data lake platform is absolutely critical. Now, if you're a smaller organizer and you don't want to have your own data science team, you don't want to build a data lake, you don't want to invest into that, right? Then the vendor can give you sufficient access, or should be able to give you sufficient access to do a top-level analysis of everything you want to know. So on the event side and the smart event side, the things are a little bit more complicated, and the complication is with the on-site experience, right? Now that we're coming back to the pandemic, the main differences there are that we also have components like the event app, which could be a different vendor potentially, and the on-site registration and badging. But all these are still linked to the central CRM system, as I've explained here. So I've color-coded it. So blue color is one vendor, right? Yellow is another vendor. This kind of teal is a third vendor, and pink is the fourth vendor. So I've highlighted 4 vendors. I think this is kind of close to an optimal solution in terms of how this could work. If you're a large organizer, most likely the vendor of the data lake will be you yourself, right? So you'll be building your own data lake on top of something that you own, because that's that's your oil essentially in the new age. So what does this solution do? What problems does it solve? So it's starting to solve 2 key things. One is connecting the data sources, right, and make sure everything is centralized. And 2, it's about a centralized, streamlined experience. So some of the key points to take away from this is, this solution architecture at a high level allows you to take control of your data. It reduces the total number of vendors, it streamlines things, and it allows you to bring specialists for different things. So, for example, if you're working with a technology provider, they're probably not great at logistics and operations, which have to do everything to do with on-site, right? So a different vendor will be better for that. And so on for the CRM. A CRM is a very specialized piece of software, right? There are plenty of companies in the world who are doing excellent CRMs, from Salesforce, Pipedrive, you name it. There's a lot of them. They're very specialized, they're very good. There's no point in competing with these. And then the actually third and final point I want to make here, based on this solution architecture, one of the key things that we're seeing is the need for organizers to treat their vendors as partners, right? Part of it is because the slim down strategy, while it has cost savings effects, what it could suffer from is if you're having to change vendors every year, right? There's investment in connecting these platforms, there's investment in setting up this flow. You don't want to be doing that. So a much better strategy is to find a vendor that you are able to build a partnership with, and of course partnerships, existing technology within a vendor is a consideration, one of the key considerations, are they able to deliver base level what we need right now? But one of the things that you should be thinking about at any given time is, okay, I understand what I want right now, but tomorrow, based on what I discover, I may need other stuff, right? I may need other things, I may need to pivot on something, something that which I may not work. Is this vendor that we're picking now going to be able to work with us? Are they going to be a partner? Can we bring them in as a partner? So that's, I think, for me, that is one of the key discussions that you should be having with any vendor that you bring into this. So this is another interesting question that we got answers from organizers for, and it's about, are you building your own data science teams? So this is very different from what we saw just 2 years ago. Like 2 years ago, pre-pandemic level, nobody was building their data science teams. Probably about 15% were building a data science team. We've been having the digital debate at UFI conferences and all kind of event conferences for years about, yes, data is super important, but nobody was actually doing anything about it. Right now, we are actually doing something about it. So what does this actually mean within the context of, let's say, an event and community platform, right? To us, this highlights 2 things. Number one, we're beginning to see expert teams coming out, at least in the larger organizers, that are able to talk about data, they're able to use data in very efficient manners, right? These teams aren't looking for some kind of fixed dashboard experience. They want to go beyond that. They want to explore, right? So what they're really interested in is a much more freedom, and they have the technical know-how to use kind of raw data. So that's almost 50%. They're in the process or building. But what we also see is that there are 50% who aren't building or aren't yet building, and who need they have a need still to understand what's going on at my event. You know, how do I get my event to be better? And so we see a distinct need for a combination of two approaches. On the one hand, we need to be able to deliver dashboards that show real-time information to a certain level of depth. But on the other hand, we need to also provide access to raw data so that organizers who do have data teams are able to process that data in kind of and do with it whatever they want, kind of feed that data lake. So this is an example of kind of some of the dashboards that we have. We've done extensive research. We've consulted industry. We actually have an industry panel that we consult about what things they care about, what do they want to find out, and we've produced a number of dashboards. This is always a work in progress for us, that provide basically real-time information about how is your event doing. You know, and we're not talking about like how many visitors do I have. Of course, we have that information, and you see that. But we're talking about things like, okay, how do we look at supply and demand? You know, I have this many people interested in these subject areas. Do I have enough content for that? You know, or if we're talking about a B2B scenario, you know, I have, I don't know, 100 vendors that are selling a certain product. Do I have enough buyers for that? Right? So things, fundamental key questions like that we should be able to answer. We also provide things like leaderboards, ability to see who is performing well, who is not performing well. You know, scoring systems. It's not gamification as it were, but basically the ability to have a scoreboard where we see based on how people have interacted with each other, how companies have interacted with content. You know, who are the people who really engage? Who are the exhibitors that really engage? You know, fill in their profiles, get their team out there, and who are those that don't? So this is the supply demand I was talking about. This is an example of kind of how we can position this with different quadrants and say, you know, this is high supply and high demand. This is great, but then we've got problems in where we have high demand and low supply, or where we've got low demand but high supply, right? And this is a way for you to rebalance the event and to say, okay, based on what we currently have right now, and you can have this from registration, right? So from the get-go, you can have this. Of course, you know, when you pick a vendor, you should pick a platform that's able to adapt. So that's not just based on registration data, because as we know, registration is not a perfect approach to gathering information. People, especially for lengthy registration forms, people will just fill them in whatever way. So it is extremely important that whatever platform you pick is actually gathering information about what people actually do, right? And is able to report that to you and is able to give you information about that. So one of the other important things that we saw in the number 5 was about how do we report ROI. I think this is critical for exhibition organizers, right? Because as we're seeing a pretty strong comeback to live events, but I think it's a strong comeback because right today we're in kind of a tidal wave of, you know, we really want to get back out there. We're hungry for human contact, right? We want to shake hands and do deals. But the thing we've got to remember, and which was an issue even before the pandemic, is that exhibitors question the value of participating in an exhibition, right? So what is our job? How can we convince them that it's worthwhile? What can we do to provide them with information to support our claim that, you know, our event is worthwhile? So real-time reporting for exhibitors is one of the key things that underpins that. So it's about showing what connections and interactions were made, right, online and at the show, bringing that into a unified real-time dashboard. The ability to see everything really from the initial interaction where somebody's browsed my profile or favorited one of my products. That already gives me a powerful trigger to be able to go, or even to go into my CRM and say, okay, you know, we need to follow up with these people later. We know what products they're interested in, things like that. Of course, that includes lead capture on site, you know, scanning people's badges, but also attending sessions, right? So if you set things up correctly and you tag your content with the same taxonomy of interest that you've got across the show, then you can actually very easily work out which people are genuinely interested in what, based on what sessions and content they've attended. And that can also be reported to exhibitors, especially if those exhibitors are sponsoring that content, right? So it's a very powerful link between content and vendors. So advertising and pop-ups, so one of the other things, I didn't really talk about this, but one of the very important things that you can have for monetizing is ultimately this is all about generating revenue, right? But so one of the important things you can have for monetizing is, of course, advertising, and the ability to make that advertising personalized, but also report on results of that advertising to the exhibitors directly is key, right? So if I buy some kind of advertising space somewhere, I want to know, did people actually view it? Did people actually click on it? You know, things like that. It sounds like basics, but this is one of the things that we're seeing that has been missing for a very long time in our industry. So those were some examples of kind of catering towards exhibitors and then catering towards the organizer, perhaps the show team level, right, or organizers who don't have a data team. Now, how can we cater, or what do we do to cater to organizers who do have a data team, who do have a data strategy? You know, even if they're in the building stage of everything, how can we help them? So one of the very important things here is, data pipelines, essentially. So how, for the initial conversation to have with them, that we often have with them, is how are you going to use that data, right? Not just where it's living, but what are you actually going to do with that data? Are you going to look at what pages people navigate from? Talk to us about the stories, the story of a person you want to know. Talk to us about these kind of things. Based on that, we need to collectively decide, right, how real time does this data actually need to be? How detailed does this data actually need to be? How are you going to work with this data? Where is it going to live? How are you going to analyze it? And then the conversation turns into, well, essentially exposing APIs and making sure that these APIs are able to cater to things. But these are conversations that are important actually to have at the outset, right? So as an organizer these days, if you're forward-looking, one of the first things you're thinking about, or you should be thinking about, is, we're going to have all this data coming in. How do we use it? And so this conversation should happen at the outset, where you discuss strategy with your vendor, you discuss the capabilities for getting data out into your own platform, and what can be done with it. One of the other key things that we as an industry have been, I think, failing a lot in doing is being too afraid to test things, right? So one of the key things that this rich data allows us to do is kind of hypothesis testing. So really being able to experiment, set an experiment up where we say, let's check, did this change that we make on the website have an actual impact on how people have interacted with our top 10 exhibitors, right? Leave a change for a day, or have a specific set of audience who view that change, and then test it. Opening these kind of APIs allows organizers to do whatever experiments they want without the vendor having to do any work. You don't have to wait for the vendor to implement something. You just have access to this data. You can set your own experiments all the way. So final question that we asked was, what metrics should the event industry focus on? I think not massively surprising, it's ROI and demand, which is something that I talked about earlier, right? So establishing, do we have enough demand? Do we have enough supply for everything that we care about here, for our target audience of buyers and vendors? And then I think the other key thing that we didn't really talk about here is engagement, right? And I'm going to use a phrase that my colleague Luke used recently. It's about Netflixization of events, right, to some extent. So what we want to do, what we should do, is create an environment that's as engaging and as addictive and as interesting as Netflix, right, where professionals go to our platform, go to our event, go to our community, for their daily news, for their daily business connections. This is the ultimate goal. This is the end game that we're trying to get to, right? And data is one of the key things that's going to help us understand how we can get there. So one piece of advice about kind of MVPs and how do you kick off the relationship with a vendor, right? And I mentioned a lot of this already, but it's really digging into the data and trends, doing studies with exhibitors. Even let your vendor, if you don't have resources to study your clients, which you probably is number one thing you should do, but if you don't do that, let your vendor do it for you. Find a way to understand what is it that your customers genuinely actually want and need. Open that conversation. Try and figure out opportunities for that will bring value. Discuss them with your vendor, and then as we talked about, set experiments, measure the results, and iterate through it. And I think one of the key things is, the diagram well illustrates, is what you don't want to do is have a minimum product that doesn't actually fulfill the top needs of your audience, right? It's much better to build something that works and that delivers what you need already, but at a basic level, without the bells and whistles, than to build something that isn't fully functional, and doesn't deliver what you need. So I think that's quite obvious. Just to rehash, this is we ourselves have adopted a very modular approach to our platform, so organizers can kind of pick the modules that they care about. It's powerful because it allows you to create a unique experience for each event without losing this kind of data connectivity and experience connectivity. So we think that's important, right? And at a high level, that if you're running a whole bunch of different types of events, that is a good thing to look for, modularity. We also integrate with and support industry standards for data, like VSAF. But yeah, there are other initiatives to do the same thing, but we think it's important to have a standard that we all work to and adhere to. So final note, we've got a smart event clinic at our stand, K41C. If you're interested, please stop by, say hello. We'd be happy to chat with you. Thank you very much. Any questions, happy to take them.